Hello and welcome back to the Women's Football Chat. Today we're going to be talking finances and more specifically the women's world transfer record and whether it's sustainable for women's football clubs to continue breaking it. So for the last 18 months we have seen the world's transfer record broken 3 times. First in September 2022 where Keira Walsh went to Barcelona for £350,000. Then in January 24 we saw Mayra Ramirez leave Levante to join Chelsea, the current WSL champions. 4-time consecutive WSL champions, that should be said, for $385,000. And then most recently, February 2024, we saw Rachel Kundananji, who's a name I keep mispronouncing, but I think I've got it right there, for £630,000. As you can see, that's scaled up quite fast. And that makes a huge difference because it was broken by Pernilla Harder just a year before that, I believe, or 2 years before that, for $250,000. Before that, it hadn't been broken for 18 years since the wife of R9 moved to Levante, I think, for around $200,000. So there was a huge period where we didn't see it broken in women's football. Now we're seeing it keep getting broken. It seems to be a competition between the top clubs as to who can break it the most. We're going to talk about the pros for that in the women's game and how that's going to grow the game, but also the cons and how acting financially irresponsibly could lead us on the same path that the current men's game is in. So, Harry, where do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's hotting up, isn't it? And I think that's the main thing to focus on, that it is that gap between each record being broken is decreasing massively. As you said, we had a very long time span, then we had Harder, then it was 2 years until Walsh, then it was 2 years until Mayra Ramirez, and then it was a month.
Yeah, less than that.
Not even a month.
Handful of weeks.
It was doubled.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing. Like, because if you look at it, Walsh was 350,000, Mayra Ramirez was 385,000, and now we're at 630,000. That's, I know it's not exactly double, but it's nearly double in, as you say, a matter of weeks. That's a big step up.
That is huge, and it shows how more money is coming into women's game. But something we have to talk about, and one of the cons of this whole situation, is the recent findings from Deloitte. So if we look back at 2021, I'm just trying to find the figures quickly, because in 21-22 there's been a huge difference basically in how much money's being generated by women's football league clubs. And what we're seeing, so looking at Chelsea and Barcelona for the 21-22 season, Barcelona reported 11.5 million in revenue. Oh no, sorry, this is 22-23. 11.5 million in revenue. Chelsea reported revenues of 3.5 million. So they're quite strong. They're both huge improvements on the season before. However, Deloitte have also said that not a single WSL nor women's football club in the top 5 leagues, so that includes Liga F, Frauen-Bundesliga, Liga Un Feminine, and I'm not sure what the Serie A is called, but those top 5 leagues, none of them made a profit. Now that is very worrying, I would say, a very bad sign for the future. Now, obviously in football, there's a lot of clubs that are running in a heavy loss. It's not a very profitable business, so I don't think this is inherently a problem. I think it's been over-dramatised a little by the media. Oh, no clubs are profitable. That's not really a problem. If you look at the Premier League, everyone's running a loss. It's how you compete. If you look at the Championship in the men's game, everyone is running in a heavy loss to try and chase the money of the Premier League. So it is very difficult to stay financially viable in football. Now, the women's game has the advantage of being able to set up a model that is more viable. The men's football has been ruined by people coming in, spending a load of money, and just and now it's a complete chase, especially in the Premier League. But the women's game's got a chance to try and slow that down. Now, the problem is a lot of clubs, or well, most clubs, obviously are owned by their parent clubs, the men's clubs, so they are getting investment through that. So they do remain, obviously, through their men's clubs, financially viable. They're not just bleeding money constantly because they do have financial backing, and that does contribute to it. So to say they make a loss is that's in the sense of their raw revenue, so match day income versus and all the other stuff that comes with that versus the wages they have to pay on players and the transfer fees they have to fork out. But for example, Chelsea had to go and buy Mayra Ramirez. That's hugely hurt them because that's £385,000 that's had to come out of somewhere, and of course that's a wage bill that's had to be paid. The amount of costs that go into that as well with regards to scouting and stuff like that will all be added to it as well. So I do think that somewhat skews Chelsea's figures for this season, but this is the 22-23 season. Again, Barcelona could say the Keira Walsh transfer is a similar thing, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of money's being thrown around, and we've got to be careful to use it responsibly. But as Vivian Miedema said, actually, or Miedema, sorry, said that as long as clubs are using the money responsibly, then it's not a problem how much money's in the sport. And I do somewhat agree with that.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. Because right now, lack of profit for clubs isn't a bad thing, but it's something that we might want to address further down the line, because if not, if it happens year upon year upon year, you create problems, and we've seen that in the men's game, and that is the one downside of when a women's club relies on their men's side. Because take Reading, for example.
Yeah.
Because their men's side is in a complete and utter turmoil with their owner, the women's team suffered, they then got relegated, and now they've lost their professional status. So,
yeah.
But obviously for clubs like Chelsea, it's brilliant.
If you'd like another example, Levante, who sold Myra Ramirez, because their men's team doesn't have enough money, they cut funding entirely to the women's side. So they were sort of in a situation where they had to let Myra Ramirez go. Now that £385,000 is going to go a long way, because that's now money they have. And when they're operating almost as a separate entity, now that Levante aren't funding them, they need every penny they can get. And that's the problem, though. It's very difficult for the women's clubs because they're not going to take precedent over those men's sides. It's always going to be first and foremost the men's team for the owners, because that's where all the money is at the moment. So they are at a slight risk that if things go wrong, if shit hits the fan, the women's side's the thing that gets cut first, and that is a huge problem. I also think the problem with us relying on the men's football is that the clubs that dominate in the men's game are going to be the same ones that dominate in the women's game. It's just a huge battle over who has the most money. So I think when Nuco comes in, there has to be something that restores parity. And I think if we're going to be honest, it's got to be something like a salary cap. We have to have a limit on the wages that can be spent. Obviously, transfer fees, that's fine. But by capping wages, you force clubs to not be able to pay as much. Now, I think that should be we should be increasing that incrementally, because the women's players do deserve to be paid more and more. So we're kind of at a weird issue now where everyone's wages have got to go up, but that's just not viable for some teams. Like Charlton, if they do come up into the WSL next season, are not going to be able to afford to pay their players the same that Sam Kerr's paid. Yeah. So that does create a huge disparity anyway. Yeah. Very difficult to measure that. It's
a really hard position, I think, the women's game finds itself in, is trying... Obviously, we want the most growth possible. We want to grow as quickly and as brilliantly as we can, but it's about measuring that growth as well, because sometimes if you grow too fast or you grow too quickly, you're going to have problems later down the line with things like finances. So it's got to be steady, but we still want to see it happening. We don't want to hit a wall in that case.
Exactly. I think growth needs to be balanced, and I think growth is obviously necessary. Every sport keeps growing and earning more. I think growth is necessary. Obviously, it's been heightened over the last sort of decade as the women's game is really in a flux at the moment. It's really going popular, and that it's got to be handled correctly. So that growth is important, but it's also about remaining fair. Because there's a lot of clubs at the moment who I think will be victims of the women's game becoming more and more popular, because there are clubs that simply can't afford to keep up with the demands now, because it's just simply impossible. Yeah. Sides that dominated or were at least competitive in these leagues 10 years ago now can't get anywhere near the top because they don't have the financial backing that some of these clubs do. Now, I'm by no means saying let's get rid of all transfer fees. I think they're really important, and I think it's a good thing at the moment. I do think it's a good thing that the women's game still has a lot of free transfers. I think that does show, it's still at a very early stage of the women's game. It's got a long way to go, but I think it's good that it's not huge transfers just yet. Now, I do think that will start to change. I think there will be £1 million transfer in the next... I wouldn't be surprised if it was broken this summer. I'm not sure for who,
that's the thing.
But I think I wouldn't be surprised.
It's also about looking at the pros of it, like spending that. You point out Levante, and you point spending whoever spends that £1 million transfer, that's going to hurt them, yes, but what that £1 million could do for
you're bringing a player, don't you? So it doesn't necessarily hurt you.
You do bring a player, yeah, and if you're spending £1 million, it's probably someone good.
And given how much Bay FC are, that's the thing, it needs more investors. The women's game needs more investors that are separate from the men's game. We need people to come in and say, I want to buy this women's team.
Yeah.
As we're seeing now, actually, with the London City Lionesses owner, Rachel Yam, who has now bought Lyon as well. So I think the more we see women's teams becoming separate entities, not in terms of their one club unity type stuff, but in terms of ownership and the finances. I think once they become they need to become separate entities in order for it to be sufficient investment.
Yeah.
We're not seeing loads of investment in the women's game because the owners aren't seeing that same profit. in return. So it's difficult. It's very difficult.
And again, it's that whole effect that everything comes into play, because if you think about the teams at the top, Chelsea and Chelsea, Arsenal, I think they're the best two examples. Is that they're the two sides that probably get to play at their men's stadium more often than everyone else, because that's it. That's one of the biggest things in football is the amount of money you make on a match day, the gate receipts, the whatever else it is, the what do you call it, food and drink, and it's all of that money is absolutely massive, and the difference for teams will be like the difference between when Chelsea play at Stamford Bridge and when Chelsea play at Kings Meadow. The money they get will be massive difference.
No, I think you can look at that two ways. Now, of course, you could say that they are successful because they play there and they earn more money, or you could look at it as they play there because they're successful. Now, I don't think if City were to try and sell the Etihad, they can barely sell 60,000 seats to people wanting to watch the men's game.
No one there.
I think there's obviously a strong City fan base, but it's not of the strength of the Arsenal fan base or the Chelsea fan base. So I definitely think there's a difference. But...
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to give credit to United too. They usually give a good crowd at Old Trafford, but Arsenal, I think, are the real leaders. The fact they are selling out the Emirates for most of their
in WSL, of course, the real leaders are Barcelona. If they fill out the new camp.
WSL wise, that is pretty good. But that's the thing, and it's a bit. This is where we talk about that growth creating a gap, because for a team like London City Lionesses, where are they going to play? They can't rent out the Emirates, can they? Because that amount of money would just put them under.
Yeah.
But, it's those smaller teams that could suffer, and that again, it is about creating growth for everyone, not just growing the top of half of the league and then leaving the rest of the bottom of the league to suffer. And it has to be managed. But overall, I think
there is a huge disparity there. If you look at the amount that Manchester United, Chelsea, Arsenal and City invest in their squads, even Aston Villa I would put in that bracket, and then you look at the rest, like they're not even going for transfer fees. A lot of the clubs at the bottom of the WSL can't afford to pay transfer fees. Even West Ham, they brought in some great talent recently,
really smart,
but they didn't spend anything. That's the difference. They got a loan player and they signed 2 free contracts. That's the difference. Whereas Chelsea had a problem in their team. They went and found £385,000 in the back of the sofa and handed it over. There's a difference there.
Yeah, and I think the other big thing is that obviously we've always said, a lot of people have always said, look, if a side was to chuck loads of money into their women's team, they will soar up the leagues into the WSL, and that is what some teams are doing. And I think the biggest actually example of that is #United. They've put money into their women's side and they're flying up the leagues. They're rolling teams over because they've invested. Because obviously Spencer Owen isn't really there's hardly this billionaire footballer that's coming from Saudi Arabia. He can afford to invest quite equally in his men's and women's side, and that's big. But no one's
doing it responsibly
exactly.
in
But
both
no
cases.
other men's side is going to do that, because if they invest so much money into their women's side, it will put their men's side in big trouble.
That's what I don't get. If you're sat mid-table in League One in the men's game, why not invest a lot in your women's team? Like Charlton. Charlton could be in the WSL next season. The money that Nuco comes in next season, we have no idea financially how that's going to look. But you would suggest that the league will only become more financially secure. The TV revenue is only going to be higher, and I do think we're going to reach a point soon where the WSL has to be behind a paywall, which is horrible to a certain extent. But I think it's necessary. We saw when the Premier League really rose when it moved to Sky Sports. When Sky Sports took it on and you had to pay to watch it, that's where we saw the growth of the Premier League, because they moved it in, they sold it internationally, and I think they'll try and do that with the WSL. I hope at least with Nuco, and we've still got to see what Nuco's plans are. Now they're talking about a lot of growth numbers. They say what they want to turn over, a certain amount of money in 10 years. They want to grow the league this much. Obviously, we don't know exactly how they plan on doing that, but I'm sure they will have a plan.
It's a very hard conundrum, because obviously the best thing for especially if we're just trying WSL, but is to put it onto things like Sky or give it to TV. The problem obviously then, it's not free to watch, it's behind a paywall, and a lot of fans will be annoyed at that. But the problem is, that's
how it's got to be funded.
It's how it's got to work. If we want women's football to grow, we're going to have to do things like that.
Yeah.
And we can support it by buying those rights to watch the games. And obviously that will mean for some people they can't watch the game. That's where we come in. Watch us live. We help you out. But it's a really difficult conundrum to have. But at the end of the day, you have to prioritise the growth of women's football over being the viewership.
I think though a lot of people would pay. I think if it was on Sky, obviously I don't want to reach a situation we have in the Premier League at the moment where you can only watch like 3 games, 4 games a weekend.
That's the thing, because it's always on a Sunday. There's no blackout. Sky could put every single game on.
Yeah,
and the numbers.
But it's whether they would, because would they earn as much from those? That's the problem.
Yeah, maybe not.
Because even BBC don't.
But it's even things like ticket prices. Obviously, Arsenal do phenomenally to sell out the Emirates, but tickets start at like £5-10. That's a couple bags of sweets.
I don't think it's not that cheap, is it?
Well, some of them were.
Okay.
Like if you're like at the really top of the Emirates, and you can't see anything, buy a pile.
Yeah, if you're still outside the Emirates, you have to pay £5.
Even Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, get behind the goal. It was £15.
Yeah, I think we will see that rise, and obviously for different games, it's higher prices when they play in the Champions League.
Oh yeah.
Hopefully, Barcelona in the semi-finals.
Arsenal will know us like.
No, Arsenal wouldn't know what that's like. I know they won it, but
in the last few years,
in recent history, they wouldn't know what that's like.
That's brilliant. It's incredible to see the whole of the whole of the new camp.
Yeah, they're really driving it forward. And the US, I think the US is doing a really good job now. We're seeing, is it KC Current are the first side to open an exclusive stadium for women's football?
It's hard for us to comment on the NWSL because it's very hard for us to kind of receive news about it or watch the games.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a demand, we'll start streaming them at 3 a.m. But Harry's just asleep.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that is. It'll be very interesting to see how the women's game grows, because I think there's a huge audience in America, a huge market for it in America, and I'm hoping it gets pushed out further there. Because while most games that are broadcast here are also broadcast in America on things like, is it? I can't remember what the network's called now. But then, the FA Player is available over there as well. And is that an option for Newco? Now, we've spoken about how they could go down the Sky Sports route. Could they go down their own broadcaster route?
Maybe, yeah.
And obviously the FA Player is very limited in its resources. So could Newco bring their own WSL streaming service where they can broadcast all the games at a reasonable cost? And therefore, they cut out the middleman, but they've got to therefore bring in the infrastructure, which is a whole new thing. I'm not sure where Newco's expertise lies. Yeah. I'm not too clued up on the company.
That is my one criticism of WSL right now is that it is on 3 different broadcasting channels. There's always a game on BBC.
Yeah.
Then there's always 1 or 2 games on Sky, and then the rest are on FA Player. That for me needs to be sorted.
Yeah.
But equally, to be fair, the Premier League have got Sky Sports, TNT, and Amazon, so maybe it doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm saying it's only 6 games a week. It feels a bit unnecessary to have 3 different channels for 6 games.
Yeah, so maybe it could be all moved to one. Maybe it could all be moved to...
Obviously, FA Cup, League Cup, internationals, keep them free to watch.
The same as it is in the men's game. That maintains the integrity of it and makes a difference. The other thing, obviously, to consider now with Newco coming in, I know we've gone quite far off the topic, but I think it's all relevant, is the impact it has on the WSL Championship, the Women's Championship, because obviously Newco will now govern those top 2 divisions, and that's something else to consider with broadcasting, because obviously at the moment, Women's Championship games are usually available for free on the FA Player. I believe they do most games on there.
I think that'd be a good game. Like, take Charlton Sunderland this season, for example.
Yeah.
That'd be a great Palace versus Southampton. They're good games.
And as the professionalisation of women's sport continues and keeps at its current rate, I think we will start to see that the Women's Championship become even more competitive and even more interesting.
The one thing to make sure it doesn't happen is that there isn't a massive gap between the Championship and League One. Because Newco's only taking in those 2 top divisions, I hope we don't see the 3rd division kind of get cut off. Yeah,
I mean, in the men's game you have... I think, though, it's good, though, because in the men's game you have just the Premier League is owned by the Premier League. And so you then see that the Championship is quite far off, and then they have to invest so much, and the EFL just can't really handle that. But by Newco taking those top 2 divisions, I think you lessen that impact because they're covering 2 divisions.
And I say that, I think, to teams like I can see #United in the Women's Championship in the next few years. I really can.
Aren't they Division 3 now?
Are they Division 3 or 4? Can't remember.
But
I definitely think they'll be in the Championship at some point.
One day.
One day, yeah.
I can see them in the WSL.
Yeah, 100%.
If they keep investing.
Chelsea will have a hashtag.
That would be good.
Just sat there. Yeah, hey, don't know why he's there. But I'm saying all it takes is investment. If you invest, the proof's in the pudding, it's going to pay off.
The FA Women's Premier League Premier Division.
I can't remember that. I think that's Tier 3.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Newcastle are equivalent.
Yeah.
Yes, that is Division 3.
And
that's the 3rd
currently going up.
Well, they're 2nd in the league behind Portsmouth. So They do need to find a couple more points, but yeah.
Okay, they're right in the driving seat. But yeah, should we go back to
That's
the transfer record then?
Let's. What else is there to touch on?
Is it sustainable? That's the question in the title.
I think it's very dependent. I'm going to answer this like a politician. I think it's very dependent on the investment and how it's managed responsibly. And I would say it is sustainable at its current rate. If we start getting silly, if we see a £2 million transfer in the next 12 months, I'll be worried because that would be a serious jump up, and I'm not sure whether that's sustainable.
No, unless it's for Lauren James.
Well, no one's buying Lauren James. That 10 million.
Hayes and Barrett.
She won't even be there, but yeah, Emma will come over and
back from the US.
But yeah, I don't see that.
You've also got to find a player that's worth that amount of money.
Well, let's talk about that. Who will be the next player to break the transfer record? Who would you say?
I think it's got to be someone that's going to leave.
For me, it would have been Lena Erberdorf, but I don't. Obviously, now she's joining Bayern Munich on a free transfer, I believe.
Let's take Russo for example. If she wasn't a free, could she have gone for $1 million?
I think that would have been close to $1 million. I think Arsenal would have been prepared to pay that. For me, Linda Caicedo will fetch more than $1 million if she was to leave. Yeah. I think she will leave because I don't think Real Madrid are the club she's going to be at forever.
Chelsea.
Now, exactly. Guro, love you, but Linda Caicedo.
No, I'm not.
Rotation.
I can't. Okay, I'll say I can't.
Rotation.
Guro, right.
Imagine an attack of Caicedo, James, Aguilar Jones. I'm talking future here, so Cannavaro still in there for now, but Aguilar Jones, and then leading the line with for Shell. That wins everything. That wins everything.
And then your bench is what? A kind of tiring Ramirez and Brighton, are they gone by now?
Well, in 10 years, they'd still probably be, what's Myra now, 24?
Yeah, she's 34, still kicking around.
After
she scored back-to-back 40-goal seasons in WSL.
40 goals?
Yeah, happening next year.
But yeah, on top of all the newcomer stuff we've talked about, do you think they'll extend the leagues or do you think they'll keep it at 12?
They need to extend it. They really do.
But when?
Not now.
2030? Is that a nice benchmark?
Yeah, maybe. Thing is, they've got to time it right where there is a position. Because I think even if we go to 16, 18, we need to be in a position where if we go to 18, right, let's go to 16 first, then we can go to 18. But if we're going to, they might do an increment of 2 actually. But you've got to be in a position where
there's just so many connotations.
Basically, what I'm trying to say is however many sides you are trying to bring up, you've got to be in a position where you have the right number of teams in the championship who are ready. Because there's no point sending up 4th in the league if they're just going to get absolutely whitewashed.
In my opinion, I think they've deliberately bought both the WSL and the Championship so they can facilitate that.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly... I think if they were just looking to keep it at 12, they'd have only bought the WSL and they'd have kept that going. I think the reason they bought the Championship is they can increase revenue in there and then build it up so they can make the top division 20 teams eventually.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of other leagues across Europe will try and follow suit because if we're going to see more European teams, so obviously UEFA has spoken about the expansion of the UWCL. We're going to see that in 2025. We're going to see the Europa League come in. At the moment in the men's football, the top 4 in the Premier League get Champions League, potentially top 5 now with the new expanded format. Then the next 2 Europa League, the next 2 Conference League. That's 8 teams. If 8 teams in the women's game were given European football, that is most of the teams in the league.
One, there are 2 teams.
There's 2 teams that don't have anything going.
3
teams
going
on. Yeah.
You go, yes, we've stayed up, but no. I think 9th would genuinely say, oh, thank God we stayed up, but we're a couple of points off Europe as well.
I also think there needs to be more. Obviously, it doesn't work with 12 teams, but there needs to be more promotion and relegation spots for the Championship and then obviously relegation in the WSL because I don't think at the moment there's enough jeopardy.
Yeah.
Because the one team that comes up is usually down there and no one else will go down.
And I look at the Championship sides.
And somebody deserves to come up. Somebody deserves to
For me, I'd have Charlton, Southampton, Crystal Palace and Sunderland.
I think they could all cut it in there.
All promoted next year, but only one of them can come through.
Exactly. So I think we'll start to see growth. Obviously, all those sides are quite strong. Obviously, the finances aren't really there in some cases, but I still think it'd be great to see them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to see how that unfolds.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you think we'll see £1 million transfer this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Big summer.
There we go. Linda Caicedo come to Chelsea. But that's everything. We just want Linda Caicedo to come to Chelsea. Any other players you think will break it? Any other contenders?
I think I just look at all the best players in the world right now. They're not leaving.
A lot of them are settled, aren't they?
Exactly. Like,
Unless-
yes, I Tyler Bonmati
I
would
was
go
gonna
for
say-
2 million, but who's going to buy it? And why
Well,
would he leave?
is there an American side that would put enough into that? The
Maybe
way
it's
Bay
older.
FC are
Maybe
throwing
it's
money
older.
around. I don't know. I think
Why
this
is she in
summer,
Barcelona? She can keep
Geraldes.
She can keep winning.
I think this summer's the perfect time if you want to try and get Aitana Bonmati. I think if you someone like
To be fair, she's one of the.
if someone
she's
like
won the Ballon
Chelsea,
d'Or,
if someone like Chelsea went for a 1.5 million bid, does that get accepted? I think Barca would be very stupid to turn that down.
and then
And would Bonmati go?
She's won the Champions League, won the World Cup, won the Ballon d'Or. She's won everything. She's mental.
The only thing that's left is the
she's
Euros,
what,
and she might do that.
25.
25, I want to say.
That's absolutely. And the only thing she hasn't got is a WSL. Bring her to Kings Meadow.
Well, she hasn't got Euros yet, but she could play in that next summer.
No,
Wow,
England.
26.
26.
But yeah,
She's
still.
26 and she's finished football. She could retire now and she would achieve so much more than any other footballer would.
Yeah.
What a player.
Very, very good. There we go. We've realised that Aitana Bonmati is incredible, that Linda Kosei is incredible, and that money makes the world go around. So give your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think it's sustainable to keep breaking the women's world transfer record? I'd recommend, if you are interested in this topic, to go do more reading, because we are not experts in financial background. But okay, maybe Harry is. But that is everything from us today. If you want to keep watching our content, there's going to be a video covering Harry's face right now, so you can give that a click and keep watching. That's everything from us today. Thank you guys very, very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.